Hey there, ghosts and ghouls. Today, I don't have a creepypasta for you. Yeah, go and get upset. Today, I have an urban legend for you. Ooh! This is different. This is a Japanese urban legend about Hakishakisuma. I don't actually have a writer for this story, but this is a story that connects very strongly with Hakishakisuma, which is a weird name to say, and I'm afraid I'm going to say Hakishakisuma. It sounds weird on my tongue, but Hakishakisuma means 8 feet tall. I think I may be completely wrong, and this story lied to me completely. If you know any Japanese at all, tell me, and then berate me for knowing it horribly. But I will be getting into the story. Like I said, there is no actual writer I can find for this. But if you know who actually wrote this, send me the thing and I will correct this mistake. And that will help me quite a bit. But this is 8 feet tall, the Japanese urban legend about Hakishakisuma. Enjoy. My grandparents lived in Japan. Every summer, my parents would take me there on holiday to visit them. They lived in a small village, and they had a big backyard. I loved to play there during the summer. When we arrived, my grandparents always welcomed me with open arms. I was their only grandchild, so they spoiled me rotten. The last time I saw them was the summer when I was 8 years old. As usual, my parents booked a flight to Japan, and we drove from the airport to my grandparents' house. They were delighted to see me and had a lot of little presents to give me. My parents wanted to have some time to themselves, so after a few days, they took a trip to another part of Japan, leaving me in the care of my grandma and grandpa. One day, I was playing out in the backyard. My grandparents were inside the house. It was a hot summer day, and I laid down on the grass to rest. I stared up at the clouds and enjoyed the feeling of the soft rays of the sun and the gentle breeze. Just as I was about to get up, I heard a strange sound. I didn't know what it was, and it was hard to figure out where it was coming from. It sounded almost like somebody was making the noise themselves, as if they were just saying, "Po, po, po," over and over again in a deep, masculine voice. I was looking around, searching for the source of the noise, when I suddenly noticed something on the top of the tall hedges that enclosed the backyard. It was a straw hat. It wasn't resting on the hedges, it was behind it. That where the sound was coming from. Then the hat began to move, as if someone was wearing it. The hat stopped at the small gap in the hedge, and I could see a face peering through. It was a woman. The hedges were high, almost 8 feet tall. I was surprised at how tall the woman was. I wondered if she was wearing stilts or some sort of huge 8-heeled shoes. Then a split second later, she walked off, strange noise disappearing with her, fading into the distance. Bewildered, I got up and wandered back into the house. My grandparents were in the kitchen drinking tea. I sat down at the table, and after a while, I told my grandparents what I had seen. They weren't really paying attention to me until I mentioned the distinctive po, 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 po. As soon as I said that, both of them suddenly froze. Grandma's eyes grew wide, and she covered her mouth with her hands. Grandpa's face became very serious. He grabbed me by the arm. "This is very important," he said in an intense voice. "You must tell us exactly how tall was she?" "As tall as the garden hedges," I replied, beginning to get scared. My grandfather bombarded me with questions. "Where was she standing? What did this happen? Where did you do? Did she see you?" I tried to answer all the questions as best I could. He suddenly rushed out into the hallway and made a phone call. I couldn't hear what he was saying. I looked over at my grandma and she was trembling. Grandpa came barging back into the room and spoke to my grandmother.
"I've got to go out for a while," he said. "You stay here with the child. Don't take your eyes off him for a second."
"What's going on, Grandpa?" I cried. He looked at me with the sad expression in his eyes and said,
"You've been liked by Hachikamasumi."
With that, he turned out, got into his truck, and drove off. I turned to my grandmother and cautiously asked, "Who's Hachikamasumi?" "Don't worry," she replied in a shaking voice. "Grandpa will do something. There's no need for you to worry." As we sat there nervously in the kitchen waiting for my grandfather to come back, she explained what was happening. She told me there was a dangerous thing that was haunting the area. They called it Hakishakisumi because of its height. Japanese Hakishakisuma means 8 feet tall. It takes on the appearance of an extremely tall woman, and it makes the sound like po, po, po in a deep male voice. It appears slightly different depending on who it sees. Some say it looks like a haggard old woman in a kimono. Others say it's a girl in a white funeral shroud. One thing that never changes is its height and the sound it makes. A long time ago, it was captured by monks, and they managed to confine it in a ruined building on the outskirts of the village. They trapped it using 4 small religious statues called Jesus, and they placed it in the north, east, south, and west of the ruins. And it wasn't supposed to be able to move from there. Somehow, it's managed to escape. The last time it appeared was 15 years ago, my grandmother said. That anyone who saw 8 feet tall was destined to die within a few days. It all sounded so crazy. I wasn't sure what to believe. When Grandpa came back, there was an old woman with him. She introduced herself as Kesson and handed me a small crumpled piece of parchment saying, "Here, take this and hold it." Then she turned to Grandpa, went upstairs to do something. I was left alone in the kitchen with Grandma. I needed to go to the toilet. Granny followed me to the bathroom and wouldn't let me shut the door. I was beginning to get really frightened by this time. After a while, Grandpa and Kei-san took me upstairs and brought me into the bedroom. The windows were covered in newspaper, and lots of ancient runes had been written on them. There were small bowls of salt in the 4 corners of the room, and a small Buddha figure placed at the center of the room at the top of the wooden box. There was also a blue bucket. "What's the bucket for?" I asked.
"That's for your pee and poo,"
Grandpa replied. Kei-san sat me down on the bed and said, "Soon the sun will be setting, so listen carefully. You must stay in the room until tomorrow morning. You must not come out under any circumstances until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Your grandmother and grandfather will not speak to you or call you until then. Remember, do not leave the room for any reason until then. I will let your parents know what is going on." She spoke in such a grave tone that all I could do was quietly nod my head.
"You have to follow Kei-san's instructions to the letter,"
Grandpa told me.
"And never let go of that parchment she gave you. And if anything happens, pray to Buddha and make sure you lock the doors when we leave."
They walked out into the hallway, and after saying goodbye to them, I closed the bedroom door and locked it. I turned on the TV and tried to watch it, but I was so nervous. I felt sick to my stomach. Grandma had left some snacks of rice balls for me, but I couldn't eat them. I felt like I was in prison, and I was very depressed and scared. I lay down on the bed and waited. Before I knew it, I was asleep. When I woke up, it was just after 1 a.m. All of a sudden, I realized there was something tapping on my window. I felt the blood draining from my face, and my heart skipped a beat. I desperately tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks on me, or maybe the branch of a tree. I turned up the volume on the TV to drown out the tapping noise. Eventually, it stopped altogether. That was when I heard Grandpa's voice calling me.
"Are you okay in there?"
he asked.
"If you're scared, you don't have to stay in there all alone. I can come in and keep you company."
I smiled and rushed over to open the door, but then I stopped in my tracks. I had goosebumps all over my body. It sounded like Grandpa's voice, but somehow It was different. I couldn't tell what it was, but I just knew.
What are you doing?
Grandpa asked.
You can open the door now.
I glanced to the left, and a chill went down my spine. The salt in the bowl was slowly turning black. I backed away from the door. My whole body was trembling with fear. I fell to my knees in front of the Buddha statue and clutched a piece of parchment tightly in my hand and started desperately praying for help. Please save me from Hachikami Sumi, I wailed. Then I heard the voice outside my door saying, The tapping on the window started up again. I was overcome by fear, and I crouched there in front of the statue, half crying and half praying for the rest of the night. Felt like it would never end, but eventually it was morning. The salt in all 4 bowls was pitch black. I checked my watch. It was 7:30 a.m. I cautiously opened the door. Grandma and Kei-san were standing outside waiting for me. When she saw my face, Grandma burst into tears. I'm so glad you're still alive, she said. I went downstairs and was surprised to see my father and mother sitting in the kitchen. Grandpa came in and said,
Hurry up, we've got to get going.
We went to the front door. There was a large black van waiting in the driveway. Several men from the village were standing around it, pointing at me and whispering, That's the boy. The van was 9 seaters, and they put me in the middle, surrounded by 8 men. Kei-san was in the driver's seat. A man on the left looked down at me and said, You've got yourself into quite a spot of trouble. I know you're probably worried. Just keep your head down and your eyes shut. We can't see it, but you can. Don't open your eyes until we've got you safely out of here. Grandpa drove in front, and my dad's car was following behind. When everyone was ready, our little convoy started moving. We were going fairly slowly, around 20 kilometers an hour, maybe less. After a while, Kei-san said, This is where it gets hard, and started muttering a prayer under her breath. That was when I heard the voice. I clutched the parchment Kei-san had given me tightly in my hands, kept my head down, but I peeked outside. I saw a wet dress fluttering in the breeze. It was moving along with the van. It was Hakishaki Suma. She was outside the van, but she was keeping pace with us. And suddenly, she bent down and peered in the van. No! I gasped. The man beside me shouted, Close your eyes! I immediately shut my eyes as hard as I could and tightened my grip on the piece of parchment. Then the tapping began. The voice became louder. There was tapping on the windows all around us. All of the men in the van were startled and on the edge, muttering nervously to themselves. They couldn't see 8 foot tall. I couldn't hear the voice, but they could hear her tapping on the windows. Kei-san started praying louder and louder until she was almost shouting. The tension inside the van was unbelievable. After a while, the tapping stopped and the voice disappeared. Kei-san looked back at us and said, I think we're safe now. All of the men about me breathed a sigh of relief. The van pulled over to the side of the road, and the men got out. They transferred me into my dad's car. My mother held me close, and tears were running down her cheeks. Grandpa and my father bowed to the men, and they went on their ways. Kei-san came to the window and asked me to show her the piece of parchment she had given me. When I opened my hand, I saw it had gone completely black. I think we will be okay now, she said, but just to be sure, hold on to this for a while. She handed me the new piece of parchment. After that, we drove straight to the airport, and Grandma saw us safely on the plane. When we took off, my parents breathed a sigh of relief. My father told me he had heard about 8 feet tall before. Years ago, his friend had been liked by her. The boy disappeared, was never seen again. My father said there were other people who had been liked by her and lived to tell about it. They all had to leave Japan and settle down in foreign countries. They were never able to go back to their homelands. She always chose children as her victims. They say it's because children are dependent on their parents and family members. This makes them easier to deceive when they pose as their relatives. He said the men in the van were all blood relatives of mine. And that's why they had been sitting all around me, and why my father and grandpa had all been driving in front and back. It was all done to try and confuse Hakikami-suma. It took a while to connect everyone and get them together. So that was why I had to be confined to a room all night. He told me that one of the little Jitsu statues, the one that was meant to keep her trapped, had been broken, and that was how she escaped. Gave me chills. I was glad when we finally got back home. All this happened more than 10 years ago. I haven't seen my grandparents since then. Haven't been able to so much as set foot in the country. Afterwards, I would call them every few weeks and talk to them on the phone. Over the years, I tried to convince myself that it was just an urban legend and that everything that happened was just some elaborate prank. But sometimes, I'm not so sure. My grandfather died 2 years ago. When he was sick, he wouldn't allow me to visit him, and he left strict instructions in his will that I wasn't to attend his funeral. It was all very sad. My grandmother called a few days ago. She said that she had been diagnosed with cancer. She missed me terribly and wanted me to see me one last time before she died. Are you sure, Grandma? I asked. Is it safe? Oh, it's been 10 years, she said. All that happened a long time ago. It's all forgotten. You're all grown up now. I'm sure there won't be any problems. But what about Hakikami-suma? I said. For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the phone. Then I heard a deep, masculine voice saying,
Pain, 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 pain.
So, my ghosts and ghouls, what did you think of that? That story, when I first heard it, gave me chills. That, especially that end, that she can call you and get your information and try and get you back. But what did you think of it? What do you think 8 Foot Tall actually does with her victims that she likes? Tell me in the comments down below, and like this video and maybe subscribe. I do a bunch like this, and I'm going to be doing more urban legends around this style. But tell me how you liked it, or tell me if you hated how I did it. But whatever way, just leave me a comment. I like those. But this is Warlock Boo. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope to be all spooking y'all real soon. Bye. I found you.